Unit 10 and 11 is regarding data management. So this is the collection of data, and then we're going to organize the data in some way, and then we're going to be able to interpret the results and answer some questions on the data that we've collected. And so by the end of the unit, you should be able to collect some data. This will be your 10-11 data assignment. You will collect some data that has been collected from all the grade 9 students, and then you're going to organize that data into a scatter plot, and then you'll be able to answer some questions regarding the data that you have collected. So when we collect data, we can have qualitative or quantitative data. So qualitative is data that we can express in words. So these are more description words. So for example, if we were collecting data about a dog, and we were looking at qualitative, let's write it up here. So if I'm looking for qualitative data about a dog, I might look at the breed of the dog. I might look at the type of hair the dog has. Is it long hair? Is it curly haired? I might look at the name of the dog. These are all qualitative types of data. So they're not expressed in numbers, just in words. Quantitative data is numerical. So I might look at the age of the dog. I might look at the weight of the dog. I might look at the height of the dog. So those are all data that I collect that I can express using a number. So we can collect data in a couple of different ways. We can use observation, so we could watch. Maybe we're sitting at a mall and we're watching how many people are wearing a red jacket. Or we're sitting at a traffic light and we're looking at how many red cars there are. So we can collect data by just observing. We can measure data, so we can actually count, like if we were trying to measure rainfall, so how much rainfall in a month in the Hamilton area. We could measure the data, or we could take surveys. So surveys are looking for people's opinions and collecting data or information by having people complete a survey. So there's lots of different ways to survey. You'll do that more in grade 10 and 11, but that's another tool that we can use to collect data. And then the data we have collected can be discrete or continuous. So discrete is when we count only in integers. So remember, integers are whole numbers. So starting at -3, -2, -1, all the way to 0. Let's put the ellipse on this side. And then 1, 2, 3. So think of the natural numbers, the whole numbers, both positive and negative. So we only have a limited number of values possible. If I plotted them on a graph, let's say we're counting the number of children in a school, you're going to have a natural number for your points. So I might have at the first school, there are 200 children. At the second school, there are 400 children. At the third school, there are 150 students. So the points are just by themselves. They are not connected. They are discrete, meaning that it's only this point, and this point. There are no points in between. Okay, we can't have 3.8 children. So we only have whole natural numbers, both positive and negative. We can have continuous data, which we could have points in between. So for example, if we're measuring time in seconds and distance in kilometers, we could have points in between. So although I measure at 0 seconds and 1 second and 2 seconds and 3 seconds, there are points in between that are possible. I just can't measure them all because there's just too many. But I do know that there's time that exists between 0 and 1 second, and there's time that exists between 1 and 2 seconds. So I could measure that. I could measure at 1.5 seconds. I could measure at 2.1 seconds. So the way we show a continuous set of data is we draw a line. And a line consists of an infinite number of points. Too many to plot, so we just draw a line to show that there are an infinite number of points in between the points that we have collected. Single variable data is something like mean, median, and mode. So mean, median, and mode is really just describing the middle of the data. So we call this measures of central tendency, central meaning the middle. So there are just 3 different ways to describe the center of the data set. The mean is one that you're probably most familiar with. That is your average. So we would collect all the numbers, add them all up together, and divide by how many numbers that we have. So that is our average. The middle value is the median, so that means we have to arrange the numbers in order, and then we look at what the middle number is. The median is a popular or a common tool used by teachers to look at the average mark. So it's not really the average, it's sort of the middle mark, and we'll talk about the advantages in a second. And then the most common piece of data is the mode. The range is the difference between the smallest and the largest numbers. So let's say we are looking at the mean. So the mean, you add up all the numbers to get a total, and then you divide by the number of entries. Some advantages to use the mean is it uses every number, so it takes everything into account when we are adding up to calculate the mean. And it's a quick way to represent the entire data value. So we're looking at all the number sets. The disadvantage is it is affected by extreme values called outliers. So remember that outliers are pieces of data that don't really fit what we are measuring. So if we are looking at test marks, perhaps I have 10 students and most of them got a mark in the 60s and 70s. But I had one student that got 100 and I got one student that got 20. So the 100 and the 20 would be considered outliers. So let's kind of look here. So let's say I had a student that had 20, then the other marks were, well, let's look at 8 numbers. So let's say we had 70, 72, and then we had 100. So the 20 and the 100 are outliers. They're kind of extreme values in that data set, and if I use them in the mean, it's going to skew the mean. It's going to make it a little bit not as accurate as it would be if I only averaged these numbers. So if I disregarded the 100 and the 20, I'd probably get a more accurate average for the class. So the disadvantage of the mean is it is affected by extreme values. The median is the middle set, so we put them in order and we look at the middle. The advantage to a median is it is not affected by outliers. So those really high values or really low values are not going to affect the middle number. It's just one number and each set has a unique median value. The mode is the most common. So also again not affected by outliers. It's very useful to find the most popular or common item. Sometimes we might have 2 modes. So that is called bimodal. If we have more than 2, we probably don't want to define a mode because it just isn't really representative of the data set. And then sometimes you might have no mode. Maybe there is no number that is common. So the mode is limited in its value, but it is something that we can look at if we want to find the most popular value. So here's the disadvantage: no repeating values. The mode is irrelevant, right? So if we don't have a mode, it isn't really useful. Or if there's many values that repeat, it's also not useful. Okay, so let's look at this data set. We want to find the mean, median, and mode. So the mean, we're just going to add up all the numbers. We don't need to put them in order. and then we're going to divide by the number of values. There are 9 numbers. So if I add up all these numbers, the total is 66. There are 9 numbers. And I'm just going to do a decimal to 1/10. So the mean or the average of these values would be 7.3. The median and the mode, I'm going to put them in order from increasing from smallest to largest. So the smallest number is 1, 2, 5, 7. I have 3 9s. I have an 11 and I have a 13. So since there are 9 numbers, the middle number would be here. So you can see that we have 4 numbers on the left of this number and we have 4 on the right, and then 9 is the middle. So 9 is the median. The mode is the most common, so there are 3 9s, so the mode is 9. And then the range is the difference between the smallest and the largest. Let's just erase this. So the largest number is 13, the smallest number is 1, so the range is 12. So those are useful pieces of information to describe the data set. The average piece of data is 7.3, the median is 9, the mode is 9. So you can see the median and the mean are a little bit different. They are not always the same, and that's because of some outliers. That small number 1 might be skewing the data a little bit, or the 13. And so they're not always the same. They give you different pieces of information. As I said, for your assignment, you will be using data to investigate a relationship between 2 variables. So once we collect the surveys that were handed out, hopefully everyone has completed the surveys, we will collect that data, and then you will choose 2 variables that you want to compare and investigate for your assignment. So that is the end of that.